You are not afraid of being own. You are only afraid of the moment when there is no place left to hide from yourself. That statement often makes people pause a little, as if someone has touched a wound they have tried to cover for a long time. But it is not a threat, and it is not an accusation. It is simply a cloudy truth we always feel yet rarely dare to name. Because there are nights when the hallway lights fade and the sound of traffic drifts away, and you hear something strange moving inside. Not your heartbeat, not your thoughts, but a quiet space opening right in your chest, like a door pushed gently by the wind, revealing a room you have not stepped into for a long time. People often think loneliness comes from the absence of someone. But what weighs on your shoulders and makes your breath uneven comes from realizing that you are here, and at the same time not here. That floating feeling is like walking through a familiar street and suddenly forgetting where your own home is. You keep walking, looking into the glowing windows to find a sense of belonging. But the more you look, the more those lights make you feel lost. That is when you understand there is an emptiness that does not lie in the room, nor in the distance between you and others, but in the layer of silence within yourself. Sometimes silence does not come in an explosive moment. It comes slowly, like water seeping into every grain of the wood in your life. You do not notice it until you sit alone on the familiar chair and feel that no sound is loud enough to drown out your thoughts. There is no longer a face for you to lean on, and when there is no one left to perform for, you feel as if you are standing on an abandoned stage. The roles that once kept you so busy you believed they were real life now lie on the floor like outdated costumes. Only you remain, in the bare shape of your true self, not decorated by expectations, not covered by busyness. This bareness always has the power to sting. It does not hurt like a wound on the skin, but in a slow and spreading way, as if someone has placed a hand on your chest and held it there for a long time. You feel as if you are standing before a dusty mirror, seeing a blurry figure you cannot tell whether it is who you are today or a version left behind long ago. That confusion makes you anxious. You try to look closer, wanting to see the eyes, the curve of the lips, or any clear detail that can remind you that you are still here, that you still are someone. But the closer you look, the more that figure drifts away, as if it steps back every time you try to step forward. Deep down, you know that figure never leaves. Its unfamiliarity shows that you have traveled far from your true self. The fear does not come from sitting alone, but from the invisible distance between you, between the life you are living and the life you were meant to live. You can feel that distance on mornings when you wake up tired for no reason, when you sit at your desk and your hands do not know where to rest, when you watch life pass by as if you're standing behind a glass wall, seeing everything yet unable to touch a thing. You have avoided this in many ways, by filling your days with work, by meeting people without depth just to let their voices cover the echo within you, by staring at a glowing screen like a curtain hiding something that needs to be seen. Even without saying it, you know you are running. Every step gives the illusion that you are living, but in truth, it is only movement in circles, never reaching the center of who you are. Until one day the spinning slows down. There is no big event, no storm of emotion, just an ordinary evening quieter than usual, enough for you to notice all the things you have pushed too far away. No messages come in, no schedule awaits, only you in the room. The warm yellow light settles on the wall like a layer of fine dust, making the space softer than usual. The ticking clock marks each second like footsteps wandering through your mind. And you know what is coming is not a fear from the outside. It is a call from within. At first, that call is very faint, like the sound of paper being torn, like the breath of a child standing behind you, like a door creaking so lightly you are not sure if it is real or just your imagination. But the feeling is real. A soft and steady pull that makes it impossible to pretend to be busy any longer. It draws you toward a part of yourself you have avoided for so long, a part that holds what has not been cried, not been spoken, not been seen. Some call it emptiness, some call it crisis, but when you sit still long enough, you will understand it is a reminder that you have been away from yourself for too long, a reminder that silence is not the enemy. It is simply the only thing brave enough to tell you the truth. And the moment you realize that, even if it flashes by like the glow of a streetlight reflected on a window, is the moment your story truly begins. Not the story of loneliness, but the story of coming home. A journey no one can walk for you, and no sound will ever be louder than the footsteps of your own self rising in the silence. You thought that simply recognizing that call was enough, but in truth everything is only beginning, because the moment you sit with yourself, another layer of air begins to fill the room, thicker, heavier, as if the space quietly shifts its shape, not in a physical way, but in the way you feel it. Everything familiar suddenly becomes strange. The corner of the desk where you usually place your cup looks like a different object. The coat on the chair feels like it belongs to someone you once knew, but have not seen for a long time. At least that is how it feels. And you start to understand that in this silence, the strangest thing is not the room, but you. When there is no one left for you to measure yourself through their eyes, you stand before an appearance without makeup, without a role. A hollow opens in the center of your chest, not to frighten you, but to show you what you have covered with polite smiles and shallow conversations. The truth rarely arrives with a bang. It usually comes with a sigh, a faint sign you could easily ignore if you keep pretending to be busy. But once you hear it, you cannot turn away. There are things trembling inside you that you cannot name. The awkwardness when you look in the mirror each morning, the emptiness after gatherings you thought were joyful, or the fatigue that does not come from the body but from somewhere deeper. All of them connect into a quiet question you often avoid. Am I living true to myself? That question does not speak loudly, does not pressure you. It simply stands there, looking at you with a calmness that feels uncomfortable, and that calmness is what makes you hurt. In that moment, you may remember the times you laughed at parties, but your heart felt somewhere else. The weekend afternoons when you pulled the curtains so the room held only dim light, as if to avoid seeing too clearly, or the moments so small they seemed harmless, a conversation left unfinished, a sentence you wanted to say but swallowed, an important decision you did not choose by desire but by what you thought you should do. Those details seem tiny, but each time you step aside from yourself, you drift farther away. Then, one day, the distance becomes a wide lake, smooth but cold. You stand on this side, seeing your reflection on the other. You realize something has been wrong for a long time, yet life keeps moving with its demands and roles, and you forget that the distance has been quietly widening, not loudly, not suddenly, only expanding in silence until you no longer know what name to give this sadness. Maybe what hurts you is not loneliness itself, but loneliness inside your own being, as if there is a locked room within you. And though you have lived many years in the house called life, you have never dared to open that door. That avoidance is not weakness. It is simply how you protect yourself, or more precisely, how you protect the version of yourself you believe must exist in order to be accepted. But when you sit in that silence, you see that protection as a layer of fogged glass. It blocks the wind, but it also blocks the true light. When all sounds fade, you hear another voice, much smaller, the voice of truth. It does not blame you, does not demand you to change immediately. It only reminds you that it is time to look at what you have feared, not to judge, but to understand, to know why you have been tired for so long, to see why there are moments you stand in a crowd yet feel you belong nowhere, and most importantly, to see why your heart sometimes feels empty to the point of echoing. That truth does not arrive as a perfect answer. It comes as memories, as images. You remember a younger version of yourself, more honest, less guarded. You remember a hobby you once loved, a desire that once burned then went out, an act of kindness you once gave yourself but abandoned. These images appear not to blame you for forgetting, but to remind you they are still there, waiting for your return. In the moment of looking back, you may feel a soft ache, not the collapse of sadness, but the sadness of waking up, like realizing you have wandered far from a place you once belonged. You ask yourself, when did I begin to drift from myself? Which decision started it? Which moment made me choose silence instead of the truth? These questions do not require immediate answers. They want only one thing from you: honesty. Honesty with the dark corners you avoided. Honesty with the small but persistent wounds. Honesty with the things you once wanted but never admitted. Because when that honesty opens, even by the smallest crack, light begins to enter. The light is not warm right away, but it is clear, enough for you to feel something shifting inside. Not salvation, but a slow and hesitant return, yet a real one. And maybe, for the first time in a long while, You truly see yourself, not through the eyes of others, not through your social roles, not through what you force yourself to become, but you, in your most original state, fragile but genuine. That seeing feels like standing before a mirror and finally noticing that the reflection no longer steps back. It stands there, waiting for you to come closer. That moment is when you touch the boundary between loneliness and awakening. A boundary so delicate that one glance away could make it vanish. But if you dare to stay, you will see more clearly what your mind has been trying to tell you all along. When you pause long enough to look at the shape of your own reflection, what comes next is not an answer, but a vague sense that you are about to step into unfamiliar territory. It feels like standing before a forest you have never dared to enter, even though you have walked past it thousands of times in your life. On the outside, everything is still familiar: the road, the trees, the distant birds, but with just one step forward, the space immediately changes color. The silence becomes thicker, the darkness deeper, and every breath you take suddenly becomes clearer than ever. That feeling makes you cautious, yet it also pulls you inward, as if there is a story within you waiting to be told. Being alone in this moment is no longer the emptiness of lost days. It carries a different quality, richer and more defined. It feels as if you are standing in a room that belongs to you, but has been abandoned for so long that even the light inside has forgotten how to work. When you enter, the dust of the years rises gently, revealing what has been resting in the quiet, the desires you never pursued, the small dreams that once made your eyes shine, the words you swallowed because you felt you were not important enough to speak. Everything is still there, untouched, waiting for someone to place a hand on it and wipe away the dust. You might not expect the truth to look this simple. It is not a moment of explosion, nor a mystical glow from somewhere sacred. It is just the small acknowledgement that you have stepped outside the story of your own life for too long. And now, as you stand in this silence, memories touch you like the fragile pages of an old book. Some pages make you smile faintly. Some make your throat tighten. Some make you close your eyes because you do not want to remember. But no matter which page appears, they all speak the same message: you once lived differently from the way you are living now. What is strange is that instead of frightening you, this realization brings a soft warmth, like finding a long-lost object you once loved. The feeling is not regret for losing it, but gratitude because it is still here. In this moment, you begin to understand that the pain in the silence does not only come from what you did wrong, but from what you quietly abandoned. It is the pain of no longer listening to yourself, of stepping out of the center of your own life just to satisfy the voices around you. Then you begin to think about freedom. Not the freedom of being unbound by others, but the freedom of being true to yourself. This freedom is not loud, does not need declarations. It feels like a light breeze moving through the hallway in the early morning. You cannot see it, but you know it is there because something in the air shifts. That freedom begins when you stop chasing the images others expect from you and return to a simple feeling. What do I truly want? Who am I when no one is watching? What have I not dared to admit? These questions are like stones dropped into a lake. They do not only create ripples on the surface, they stir the layers of water that have been still for a long time. You cannot predict what will rise. Sometimes it is a beautiful memory you forgot. Sometimes it is a sadness you thought you had healed. Sometimes it is a version of yourself you wanted to become but abandoned because you felt you lacked courage. All of these are your truths, and none of them are shameful. The deeper you look into that place, the clearer you see one thing: being alone does not only expose the emptiness, it also reveals the ability to heal, a quiet but powerful ability. It does not come from others or from advice someone gives you. It comes from finally allowing yourself to listen without judgment. This listening is what you have lacked the most. In this moment, you suddenly realize something small but essential: you are not alone in this journey. Not because someone is sitting beside you, but because countless others have walked through similar darkness. And perhaps, if you share even a small part of what you're going through, you might help someone feel a little less lost. If the story opening within you brings you to any insight, you can leave a few lines of reflection, not for others to see you, but for you to see yourself more clearly. And if you wish to continue exploring these deeper paths, following the channel may be how we stay connected in the quiet that matters. When these thoughts settle, you feel a very gentle movement inside. Not a movement outward, but inward, toward the place that never received enough of your attention. That movement is like a faint light seeping through a crack in the door. You do not know where it leads or what it will reveal, but it makes you want to keep going. And you understand that to step into that light, you must accept walking through the remaining shade within you. In this moment, the silence is no longer a threat. It becomes a guide leading you into layers you once feared so deeply that you never dared to imagine them. And though this journey might be difficult, it carries another truth that is unmistakably clear: you have stopped running. You have stood still long enough to finally begin to see yourself. This is the point where the story turns toward new ground, a place where being alone is not just a challenge, but becomes a kind of discovery. A discovery of yourself, of what was left behind, and of the ability to be reborn from the silences that once felt hopeless. There is something strange that happens when you begin to see yourself more clearly. Instead of feeling immediate relief, you sense a deeper emptiness widening inside. It is not the kind of emptiness that frightens you, nor the heavy loneliness that once pressed on your chest in those early nights. This time, the feeling is like standing in a wide and quiet room where you can hear the echo of your own footsteps on the wooden floor. When that sound comes back to you, you realize this emptiness is not here to threaten you, but to ask a question you have avoided for a long time. What have you left behind within yourselves? You stand in that room, trying to hear the whispers that remain. Sometimes it is the voice of a youthful dream you never pursued. Sometimes it is the sigh you let out on a rainy afternoon when you realized you had just done what suited everyone but yourself. Sometimes it is the sharp ache in your chest when someone asked if you were all right, and you answered, "I'm fine," so quickly that you heard your own discomfort in the reply. Those small fragments that once seemed meaningless, when gathered in this silence, become proof of a long absence. You do not remember when you began losing yourself. It didn't happen through one dramatic event, but through tiny compromises. One time trying to please someone, one time nodding even though you wanted to say no, one time agreeing to something that felt wrong because silence seemed easier. Each time you stepped back, no one noticed, not even you. But now, looking back from the distance of the present, you can see every backward step marked on the map of your life. You begin to understand why the emptiness appears in the simplest moments. Like in the evening when water boils in the kitchen and you watch the steam rise, wondering how you have been living all these years. Like when you sit in your car on the way home and suddenly feel like a guest in your own life. Like when you look into your eyes in the mirror and see something missing that you cannot name. These are not signs of weakness, but traces of a soul that has been waiting far too long for you to return. In the silence, sometimes you see a very clear image: a child standing at the end of a hallway. The child does not cry, does not speak, only looks at you. Its eyes hold no blame, no sadness. It simply seems to ask, "Why were you gone so long?" That child is not a memory, nor imagination. It is the part of you that once longed to be heard, to be protected, to live in alignment with what it desired. But somehow, you let that part drift behind, buried under work, goals, and the perfection you thought you had to achieve. The more you look into this emptiness, the more clearly you see that the pain does not come from the absence of others, but from the absence of yourself. You have moved too fast to keep up with the pace of the world, yet abandoned the pace of your own heart. A slower pace, a truer one, asking you to stop, to listen, to face yourself. And now, with enough courage to stand still, that inner rhythm returns like a heartbeat merging with the air. There are moments when the emptiness feels like standing at the threshold of something important but unnamed, as if you are walking through a forest both dim and beautiful, unsure of the path but unwilling to turn back. In that forest, you are not being chased by fear. You are simply invited to walk deeper to find something lost, perhaps an old memory, something you once believed in, or a raw emotion buried under the days you tried too hard to be strong. And then, within the shadows, you realize the emptiness is not a hollow void. It is like an unfurnished room, a room waiting for you to place back what truly belongs to you. But to do that, you must look into every corner, Even the ones covered in the heaviest dust, you must face forgotten desires, small hurts dismissed as unimportant, decisions that pulled you away from your own essence. In truth, looking directly at this absence is not about blaming yourself. It is like opening a window after years of being shut, letting light and wind rush in. At first, the room may look messy, chaotic, revealing everything you hid in the corners. But this is the first step to putting things in order, to ask yourself what truly matters, to see what in your heart still waits to be touched. That moment may bring a quiet kind of ache, not because you are weak, but because you are beginning to understand a simple truth: you no longer want to live far from yourself. And that is where the story shifts, when emptiness is no longer a place of fear, but becomes a doorway into a new kind of presence, a presence whose shape you cannot fully see yet, but can feel growing within you. And you know that if you keep walking, you will come closer to it. When you stand in that emptiness long enough, a moment begins to unfold that is hard to notice but deeply important. There is no signal, no dramatic beam of light, only a small shift in the air, as if the room inside you takes a long breath in and then exhales. For the first time, you do not only see what is missing, you also sense a space opening for something new to enter. From a shapeless emptiness, you realize you are standing before a different kind of silence, a silence no longer heavy like stone, but gentle like a still surface of water waiting for someone to touch it. In this quiet, you understand that what you once feared was never the act of being alone, but facing yourself without anything to hide behind. Yet now that you have looked into the dark corners, you find them far less frightening than you imagined. They do not want to swallow you or push you aside. They simply waited for you to grow enough to open the door and hold that space with your own presence. There is something deeply human in that moment, like standing in front of an old friend you have forgotten for too long, and both of you feel equally unsure as you meet again. You begin to touch something you never imagined before. That solitude, when met with honesty, can become a place of shelter rather than a prison. You find yourself sitting on the familiar chair, but this time without feeling trapped in a corner. There is a sense of intention in your posture. You no longer reach for music, switch on the TV, or message someone just to fill the quiet. You let the silence stay. You breathe inside it for a moment. You see what happens when you stop running. When you stop running, the first thing you hear is not pain, but your own voice. Not the spiraling thoughts that ask why and lead you nowhere, but softer, kinder questions. What do I need right now? Why have I been moving so fast? What did I leave behind along the way? These questions do not push or judge. They feel like the gaze of someone sitting across from you, soft enough to help you feel safe, yet honest enough that you cannot pretend any longer. This is the true beginning of transformation. Not the moment you dramatically change everything, but the moment you sit still and begin a real conversation with yourself. You see what has been hidden, the desires held back, the limits you adopted because of what others said, the small sadnesses you brushed aside because you thought they were not worth mentioning. All of it appears like an old painting illuminated after years in the dark, not perfect, but real enough that you want to place your hand on it. In this journey, you start learning how to listen again, not to the world, but to the subtle movements within. You realize you spent many years living outward, responding to the pace of others, adjusting yourself to the demands of life. Now, in this solitude, you are doing the opposite. You let your inner world lead. You learn to sit quietly and write a few simple lines. You walk slower in the afternoon and notice the sound of wind brushing the rooftops. You turn off your phone earlier and allow yourself to rest inside your body without performing anything at all. These small moments do not look significant, but they build the foundation for fullness from within. Not the fullness that comes from achievement or praise, but the fullness of knowing you can be alone without falling into a void. Knowing that silence can become a room you return to each day, not to escape life, but to understand it more clearly. You realize that choosing solitude is not withdrawing from the world, but reconnecting with your true self. And from there, the way you step back into life changes. This change is quiet, not big actions, but delicate movements. You no longer say yes so quickly. You no longer force a polite smile when you are tired inside. You no longer seek validation in every glance. Some evenings you choose to cook for yourself instead of chasing noise. Some mornings you leave the window open longer to feel a layer of air you never paid attention to before. All of it shows that you are learning to stand on your own feet. What is interesting is that in this journey, you begin to see that society is no longer the center guiding your choices. You see clearly which relationships make you shrink, which places require you to wear a mask. And once you see, you no longer cling to them, not because you are cold, but because you are building something more lasting and inner grounding. You understand that without it, you will always depend on someone else's presence, but with it, you can connect with others out of willingness, not fear of losing them. At this point, you start to feel silence more like a home than an emptiness, a place you can return to without feeling abandoned, a place where you can breathe without your chest tightening, a place where you begin to piece together parts of yourself you once thought were lost, and you understand that solitude, when cared for properly, is not a sign of lack. It is the doorway to becoming someone who can stand strong without needing anyone to hold you up. When solitude finally becomes a place you can stay, something else begins to appear, clear as a shadow behind you at dusk. It is something you have always sensed but never dared to name: the act of running from yourself. You realize it has never been a passing habit, but a quiet way of moving through life that you've carried for years. Some days it shows up as piles of work, as if a crowded schedule could keep your mind too full to feel anything. Some evenings it becomes laughter in noisy gatherings, where you try to blend in so you do not have to hear your inner voice. And at times it takes the shape of the blue glow of a screen, bright enough to blur every emotion inside you. You begin to see what you once thought was ordinary. Sometimes you pick up your phone not to check anything, but to avoid feeling. Sometimes you accept another project not because you need the money or growth, but because you fear the empty moments. Sometimes you keep someone close, not because you love them, but because you fear the moment it would be just you and the silence. None of this is wrong, but now that you have stood still long enough, you see them differently. You see yourself like a traveler rushing forward, leaving behind the most important parts of who you are, simply out of fear of turning back. One evening, you sit in the familiar room, the soft light no longer making you feel lonely. Yet something makes you let out a long, heavy breath, as if releasing years of tension. In that breath, you realize the exhaustion never came from doing too much, but from running too far, running from emotions you once labeled as bothersome, running from questions you did not want to answer, running from the places in you that felt too fragile to face. But the more you ran, the deeper you fell into a loop, the busier you became, the emptier you felt, the more people surrounded you, the more lost you were. You remember the afternoon moments when sitting in your car suddenly brought a wave of confusion, not because of traffic or distance, but because your mind saw you living like a stranger inside your own life. You watched yourself move, talk, laugh, work, yet felt none of it living inside you. It was like rewatching a film in which you were the lead, but the performance feels unfamiliar. You look at it and wonder, am I truly living, or just acting out the version of myself the world finds easiest to accept? When that question rises in this new silence, you see that running from yourself never started as a storm, but as small compromises. One time you held your feelings back because you feared judgment. One time you said, "It is fine," though every part of you wanted to scream otherwise. One time you accepted something because you thought you were not important enough to ask for something different. Each time, you pushed yourself a little farther from your own center, and as those threads connecting you to yourself thinned, your heart slowly emptied without you noticing. It did not shatter. It simply wore down. Now, in the stillness, where you can finally look back, you see this running like wandering through a large house with many half-open doors. You move from room to room, changing spaces constantly so you never have to stand still in any one of them long enough to feel. You think the movement protects you, but every room in that house holds a part of you, the things you feared, the things that hurt you, the disappointments, the hopes, the unspoken wants you once had for yourself. You run to avoid entering the room of sadness, but in doing so, you drop your joy somewhere along the hallway. You avoid the room of anger, but by avoiding it, you also lose your passion. You stay away from the room of memories, but by staying away, you lose your connection to what once made you feel alive. Running protects you from immediate pain, but it also costs you the map that leads back to your own core. The price you pay is that nameless emptiness that slips into every moment. It makes you feel vaguely lacking. Whether someone is beside you or not, lacking. Whether work is good or not, lacking. No matter how complete your outer life appears, not lacking material things, not lacking love from others, but lacking your own presence in your own story. Then, in the moment you stop running, the truth appears slowly but clearly. This avoidance is the source of every ache you once blamed on life, not because someone hurt you, not because the world is unpredictable, but because you have not been beside yourself for a long time. You have lived like someone borrowing their own life, never fully touching it. Seeing this does not break you. Instead, it brings a strange lightness, as if you finally understand where you got lost, as if you have found a map tucked away in an old drawer, and now you can lift it, wipe off the dust, and look at the path you avoided for too long. For that reason, you know the next step is not to blame yourself, nor to return to the old cycle of running. The next step is learning how to stand still, learning how to enter the rooms you once ignored, learning to look at your fears not to fight them, but to understand why they came, learning to allow yourself to stop escaping. And it is here that a completely new chapter begins to open, the chapter of rebuilding your relationship with yourself, a relationship no one ever taught you how to create, yet one that matters more than every other relationship in your life. When you finally stop after years of running, the first thing you feel is not an eruption of emotion, but a kind of stillness unlike any silence you have known before. It is no longer a heavy fog sitting on your chest, and not the hollow emptiness that once made you feel as if you were standing in an abandoned house. This time the quiet has the warmth of a small flame, as if someone has lit a tiny fire, not blazing, but steady, soft, and strong enough to illuminate a corner of your soul you once believed had gone dark. You sit down, not to escape the world, but to meet yourself again. And in that moment, you do not feel lonely anymore, not because someone has joined you, but because you realize you are sitting with the very person you have searched for everywhere else. That person is not found in anyone's eyes, not in the approval of the world, not in half-hearted relationships or glittering achievements. That person is here, inside your chest, waiting for you to come home. It is strange that this return does not make you feel powerful, but honest. Every protective layer falls away like the last thin curtain. No more worn-out excuses, no more roles you used to avoid being hurt, no more of that familiar "I'm fine" you wore for years. Only you remain in your original form, with your small scratches, your incomplete wishes, your old pieces and the new ones quietly being born. You realize every fear that ever chased you came from one belief you once thought you were not enough to stay with yourself. You feared the empty space because you thought nothing inside you was steady enough to trust. But now, as you look deeper, you see something different. You see a wide, calm space that can become a home if you are willing to step into it and light a small spark. You see a delicate but real wholeness. And most importantly, you see a capacity to hold yourself that you never imagined you had. As this truth settles in, you feel something astonishing. You no longer need others to fill the emptiness. Not because you are isolating, but because you have become your own source of light. You are not waiting for anyone to save you, not asking anyone to heal you, not clinging to anyone so they will hold you up. What you do is stand a little straighter, breathe a little deeper, and walk a little lighter into life. The change is small enough that no one else may notice, but it shifts the entire direction of your journey. You begin hearing your own voice more clearly when you have decisions to make. You know what tightens your heart and what opens it. You sense the difference between staying with someone because you need them and staying because you want to share what you already have. You understand that love is no longer a struggle to fill an inner void, but a meeting between two people who each have a sturdy home within themselves. No more gripping, only choosing. Interestingly, as you grow fuller inside, the world outside sounds different. You no longer see others as pieces to fill a space in you. You see them as souls with their own stories. You connect slowly, without rushing, without needing, but with resonance. You love not because you lack, but because you overflow. You enter relationships not to seek shelter, but to expand. And when you walk away from something that is not right, you no longer feel like you have failed. You feel like you are honoring the truth in both lives. But the clearest change does not show in how you love others. It shows in how you love yourself. You start noticing the small but essential things: a quiet morning beside a cup of coffee, a stretch of time with no interruptions, A slow walk in the afternoon to hear your own heartbeat. You give more time to the things that make you feel real, reading a page that shifts your inner world, writing a few lines to hold on to wandering thoughts, or simply sitting by the window, watching sunlight change color on the wall. These things do not make life explode. They make it take root. And when a life has roots, you no longer fear the wind. You do not fear losing people. You do not fear leaving. You do not fear beginning again. You do not fear the quiet, because you know, whatever happens, you will always have a place to return to yourself. From here, solitude is no longer a temporary phase. It becomes part of your inner structure, a place you return to for renewal, for listening, for recalibrating your direction. It is like a private boat you can use to cross any wave out there, not because you do not need anyone, but because you no longer lose yourself when someone walks away. And perhaps the greatest freedom you find is the ability to live without shrinking from fear. Fear of being left behind, fear of not being loved, fear of not being enough. All those fears once pushed you to run until you were exhausted, but now you look at them differently. You do not drive them away. You do not deny them. You simply see them as something old that you have grown strong enough to walk through. You understand that silence is not a doorway to emptiness, but an entrance to presence. You understand that loneliness is not a sentence, but a reminder you have not yet come close enough to yourself. You understand that solitude, when embraced with awareness, is not fear, but the purest form of freedom a person can touch. In the end, you discover something beautifully simple: you were never lacking someone else. You were lacking yourself, and when you find yourself again, the world feels lighter. Not because it has changed, but because you are moving through it with a heart that finally has a place to stand. And perhaps, in the quiet after this story, you will look around the room where you are sitting and see that everything is still the same, yet you are no longer who you were. As if a small door has opened, not loudly, not hurriedly, just enough for you to step into a new life, where solitude is no longer something you fear, but something you are grateful for.
Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.